The Baylor Bears have found a leader. Or is it leaders? This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel. I am your host, Cam Stewart, and today we are breaking down a Baylor basketball win. Isn't that fun? Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. I appreciate all you guys who come in here and like and subscribe and leave a comment and tell your friends about it. The Baylor Bears, 77-69 winners last night in Orlando, ending a 3-game losing streak here within the Big 12 conference, a Big 12 road victory. Okay, that always holds some weight, especially against a team as tough as UCF, man. Top 8 in the nation in overall scoring defense. Baylor dropped 77 on them. That's a good day at the office. And a couple of guys had good days at the office. Langston Love again, 24 points off the bench. I think it was, 24? He had an incredible stat line, and he's not even going to be the player that I'm highlighting the most. Sorry about that, Langston. Yes, he had 24 and 7 rebounds on the night. So, I mean, big performance off the bench once again for him. Jalen Bridges was hot early on, kind of simmered down, ends up with 12. Yves Missi, I thought, had a night that was much more effective than what he looked like in the box score. 11 points, all of them loud, but only 1 rebound. Didn't see that one coming. Jacoby Walter, quiet night from the floor, to say the least. Only took 4 shots, 8 points. He goes 5 of 6 from the free throw line, which really helps. And it's a big 3 in that second half. He did a lot of things right. But the guy who I am looking towards as the one who picked up the mantle and led the Bears to that victory is a guy who I thought has quietly gotten much better as the calendar turned to January into the conference schedule. And whether they've won or lost, I think he has been a guiding force for them. And that's your point guard, RayJ Dennis. And I know a lot of people weren't happy about how much the ball is in his hands down the stretch. But games like last night show you why the ball is in his hand that much. First off, he's their only point guard, like true point guard. For a couple minutes at a time, you can go to Langston Love or Jaden Nunn or sometimes even Miro Little to handle the point for you. But RayJ is your guy. RayJ is your floor general, and he was absolutely that last night. And you might be looking at the stats and saying, Cam, really? This is the guy you're touting up? A guy who was 3 for 9 from the floor? Yes, as a matter of fact. Had 11 points and some big ones down the stretch. I mean, he really was fully in his bag with like Kyrie Irving out there, the way he was starting, getting a look at the basket. I am convinced that whenever he wants to, he can get to the basket, which is another Kyrie Irving kind of thing. He can get there, and he can score with his right and his left amongst the trees and get extension. It's really a great skill to have. And he showed you that last night. And more importantly than just the points, he was controlling the game. 11 points, sure. 8 assists. Yes, please. And I talked about this in the post-game show, but I'll talk about it here. There was one moment that I wrote down that was so impressive to me that really showed that RayJ was in his bag. This was 4.5 minutes to go. Baylor's up 2, and RayJ assists on an Yves Missi dunk that puts them up 4 and puts them up for good. I don't think they relinquished the lead after that. And it is this great, sick pass from RayJ. He's on the wing at about the free throw line extended, and Yves is cutting through the lane. And RayJ has essentially a double team in that there are 2 guys between him and Yves Missi. Okay, so he's got one that's obviously covering him. He's got one that's facing up Yves and trying to take away the cutter. And then there's backside help on Yves Missi too. So 2 guys between him and his target, and 3 guys who are looking at him and have a route to the ball. Offhand, left-handed, bounce pass, perfect lead pass into the paint where only Yves Missi could get it. It's almost like in soccer where they curve, they bend the free kicks. That's what he did around one of these defenders. Only Yves Missi could get there, right in his stride, dunk, even though it was 4 with 4.5 minutes left, ball game. Huge momentum basket, and that's what he was doing all of the second half. And if you look back at the logs, he, even when they were losing those games, his efficiency improved a ton from what it was in the non-conference schedule. I thought his decision-making was a lot better. His defense has gotten pretty good. I mean, for a guy who wasn't necessarily known for it, and we didn't have a lot of expectations for him on the defensive end, he's a pretty good defender. And especially for someone who's next to Jaden Nunn, you don't notice it a lot. He's a pretty good defender, and he gave you all the plays that you needed down the stretch in this game. And that is such a bonus for Baylor. This game overall, say what you want about it being UCF. First off, they beat Texas on the road and they beat Kansas. This is not your slightly older brother's UCF team. And they're really well coached, which you could say about just about any team in this league. So say what you want about that. But this win was overwhelmingly positive for Baylor. They fell down early. UCF was shooting the lights out. They ended up shooting 52% from three. They're not going to do that again all season, man. I mean, credit to them. They had a great night. Darius Johnson had an emotional game where he was excellent offensively, 23 points, 10 assists, 7 rebounds on 9 of 12 shooting. Doesn't get much more efficient than that, but they were fading away. They were contested. They were hitting all these threes, and you're like, okay, this has got to revert back to the mean. And Baylor did not hang their heads. They didn't mail it in. It did revert back to the mean, and Baylor's defense was really impressive in the second half. They were plus 14, only gave up 31, which, you know, if you watch the game, you saw how many of those were in the last minute and a half kind of garbage time, where UCF didn't necessarily threaten, but they were putting the ball in the basket. But that was a great defensive performance from Baylor, which you can't see a ton of in the stats. But there were a couple of stretches that we're used to as Baylor fans looking at our team's offense that UCF had in the second half, where they were going 3 or 4 minutes without a field goal. That was a good defensive performance. And anytime you're scoring 77 on a top 10 defense in America, you're looking pretty good. And they did. They looked good in the stat sheet. They looked good in the eye test. You almost scored 80 against them. So I say that's 85 against a lot of teams in this league. And Jacoby Walter gave you 1 field goal. So you did all right. And what I have noticed, especially offensively, is Baylor is such a plus team in the paint right now. Teams are really having trouble guarding Yves Missi. I can imagine why. I think he's the best player on the team, and he's a superstar. Going to be a lottery pick. The more of these games he has, the less time we have with him. So appreciate it. But he is just, no one in this conference has really been able to guard him yet, except Cincinnati. But he has 11 points, so it's not, setting the world on fire, but it's another big plus game, plus 14 in the paint for Baylor. That is the offensive versatility that we thought that this team possessed. By the way, I always liked looking at this, the lead time. Only 3 lead changes in the game. UCF led for 31 minutes. Baylor just 6:42, and they get the win. Awesome, awesome bounce back. Flipping the switch. Speaking of flipping, I think we should talk about a little football flipping, if you don't mind. But first, as we have all week, I tell you about my good friends over at FanDuel, proud sponsor of Locked On Baylor and the Locked On Podcast Network. And it is the best time of year for FanDuel because it's the best time of year to bet. We are looking ahead at the Super Bowl. No better time to get on FanDuel than right now because, there's really only a few things you need to worry about Super Bowl Sunday. The next day should be a national holiday, I know. But the only things you got to worry about, get a good seat. Nothing I love more than sitting down, getting the right snack, and placing those bets, okay? You can, not only can you say who's going to win Super Bowl 58, but there's so much other stuff you can do. Explore. I mean, it's your oyster out here when it's the Super Bowl. You can also bet on which players will score a touchdown, how many points are going to be scored, the color of the Gatorade, how long the anthem is, how long the halftime show is, all that great stuff, so much more. New customers, join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins, okay? It's $200. It's a good chunk of change in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. So just visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports book of the NFL. Switching gears over to football here. You might remember a few days ago, I ran a show with Will Turboff of Bears Illustrated and 24/7. He was talking about how positive Junior Day was for the Bears. And look, I get the cautious optimism that comes with that. They do have the number one class in the Big 12 for the class of 2025 right now. A couple of 3 stars and now a 4-star. Before I get to him, just talking about Junior Day a little bit, no matter if these kids come here or not, there is something that Dave Aranda is still getting them in the door. These top 4 or 5 stars and like top 50 prospects. I know it doesn't win you games. I know. I am just surprised after 3 losing seasons in 4 years and a 3-9 season that they're able to attract these guys to their program. By the way, I mean, Will talked about it. You know, it's not the end all be all, but they're going to Junior Days the same days that like Oklahoma has Junior Days. Top 50 prospects, Oklahoma's looking at them too. So it is a nice sign. You need to see them actually sign the dotted line, and then for it to actually convert into wins to feel good about Dave Aranda, of course. But one of the things that Dave has been hit or miss on is surrounding himself with the right people. I saw some people who would talk about how, you know, after the season, how Ron Roberts was really the genius and how that's a bad look on Dave Aranda. Is it though? Is it? That means he picked a good assistant coach. And I hear this all the time. Oh, this guy was carried by his coordinator, who he hired. Anyway, I say that to say because he's brought in the right guy for his associate head coach. Khenon Hall gets a big flip for Baylor. Demetrius Brisbon, who we talked about on the show with Will, he is an athlete. He's the quarterback at Tyler Chapel Hill, plays both ways. He's looking to play safety in college, it looks like. 4-star guy, led his team to the state semifinals last 2 years, had some real good teams at Chapel Hill, and has been a starter for basically 2.5 of his 3 seasons. And he was committed to SMU. You might remember Baylor got Khenon Hall from SMU. And now, after Junior Day, he is committed to Baylor. He announced it on Twitter last night. That's a big get, man. That's a big get. Now, for people like you and I who are not football coaches and can't just dissect the tape, it's a weird one to kind of talk about his stats because he's got quarterback stats and he's going to come in and probably play safety. But I've actually seen him on tape. And that was preparing for 4A games, not for Baylor signings. He is a tremendous athlete, like truly one of those, I don't want to say diamond in the rough, but like real elite athletes out there. And, you know, at that kind of level, he's the one where you just want the ball in his hands as much as possible. And so he plays quarterback for Chapel Hill, but he's got a composite score on 24/7 of just under 90, 89. And he's the number 22 athlete in all of Texas. And so, I mean, that's almost a low 5-star there, man. He was the MVP of his district as a sophomore, and was the unanimous offensive newcomer of the year as a freshman. And I misspoke. I believe it's 3 straight semifinals for Chapel Hill. They had a big win at McLean Stadium this year, as a matter of fact, in the playoffs. But his rushing yards are just showing the kind of athlete he is. I mean, over 1,000 in each of his 3 seasons at Chapel Hill. In 2021, it was less snaps, a lot less snaps. Still got over 1,300 yards, over 1,700 rushing yards this year on 160 attempts. Oh man. And only 13 rushing touchdowns. He had 15 and 16 the 2 years before that. So 44 for his career and one first down run away from 4,500 career rushing yards. The man is just a freak athlete. And I think more importantly than just him is what Khenon Hall is bringing you. Because look, I'll admit I'm skeptical because every time an assistant coach comes in, it's, oh boy, he's a great recruiter. A great recruiter. I mean, how many times did we hear about that the last few years? Stewart and Munoz and Mateos and all these guys, all these positional coaches, Bell too. They're great recruiters. And we hear some stories here and there, especially including that last example that I just gave, Sean Bell, where you'll hear about the great relationships he had with kids. The point is, we don't know. We don't know. The only way we can measure it as fans, and the only way you could measure it in terms of keeping your job, is how many of those guys actually sign. So it was great that Sean Bell had a great relationship with DJ Lagway and Austin Novosad, but they didn't come through the door. So I'm always skeptical about these guys. You've never heard an assistant coach get hired and someone say, not a good recruiter. Maybe keep him away from the parents' couches. I don't think he can recruit. You never hear that. And so I just try to be, wary of that bait whenever it's out there. And then sometimes you see it pay dividends. I actually did think you saw it pay dividends with Eric Mateos early on with some of the guys he got out of the transfer portal, not the least of which being Jacob Gall. But now you're seeing tangible results from Khenon Hall. In essentially, he was hired in December, but the first month that he's out there on the road, he has already flipped the 4-star. It's big, man. And Will was talking about it in that show too. SMU has got good recruits committed the next couple of years. And I have a feeling a lot of that is Khenon Hall. And so Baylor, whether it should be this way or not, I think it's a little bit of Baylor regressing a little bit over the last couple of years and SMU's profile being raised. Those guys, and I'll put TCU in there too, they're all going for similar recruits. There is that upper echelon of athletes in Texas that if they're staying here, they're only going to UT or A&M. And then there's Micah Hudson at Tech, but that's a different story. And then what's great about Texas is there's such a great second tier of talent that places like Baylor, TCU, SMU, Tech, Houston can really get in on the party. And that's an advantage that someone like a Purdue doesn't have in Indiana. You know what I mean? So they don't have that talent pool. Iowa State and Iowa, obviously they do a good job with it, but they don't have the same kind of talent pool. And I say that to say there were such fine margins in having the right recruiter and having the wrong recruiter. Dave Aranda realized that SMU had a great recruiter in Khenon Hall. And he went out and got him, brought him up a level, and now he's starting to bring some of his groceries with him. And that's humongous. But Demetrius Brisbon, is going to be, I think, a stud at the next level. You say that about all those guys who get 4 stars, and he has earned every star he has. And he ain't done yet. Chapel Hill's always a great program, and we'll see a lot more highlight tape of him. But just remember, people, he's coming in as a safety. So when you see him ripping off those 70-yard runs, he's just going to be doing that for a pick 6. Fingers crossed. Big win, Khenon Hall. Big win, Dave Aranda, to have Khenon Hall. Lady Bears looking for a big win. Big game. And they will take on the Texas Longhorns tonight from the Foster Pavilion. That's Baylor women's basketball in a top 15 matchup, and one that Baylor kind of has to have. They did already beat Texas down in Austin on December 30th. I think they won that game by like 6 or 7, but they didn't trail the whole game. So it was a pretty dominant performance. Texas was top 5 at the time, second top 5 win of the year for the Bears. And before I get into this game, one thing that's important to note is Kansas State lost, which that's a big deal when it comes to the conference standings here. It looked like after that bit of a losing streak that Baylor was in a tough spot, that they might not be able to come back in the conference standing and challenge for that regular season title that I really felt good about even a couple weeks ago. But Kansas State just got their first loss in the conference, so obviously still at the number one, but OU at 8-1, breathing right down their neck. They've won 5 in a row. They're the ones who beat Kansas State. And Baylor still sitting back at 5-3. And just ahead of them at 6-3, the Texas Longhorns. So these are two teams who, I mean, this is a crucial game. In soccer, when you get 3 points for a win, they call this a 6-point game. And that's exactly what it is, because the team that wins this game should put on a full head of steam and challenge for that top spot in the conference, because both of these teams are talented enough to, even without Rory Harmon on the Texas side, both these teams are absolutely good enough to challenge for that top spot. And thankfully for Baylor, this game is at home. We need to bring a great environment there tonight. No reason not to. Top 15 matchup. Bring the energy tonight. Let's go. Let's make this a cauldron. Let's make this one of the best, if not the best, because it should be the best environment for women's basketball in the entire Big 12. Let's do it. Tonight's the last time the Longhorns are coming here for women's basketball, which Baylor has dominated them in the last 15, 20 years. Anyway, looking back on that other game, trying to see things that Baylor can take with them into this game tonight. Looking back at it, it wasn't as dominant a performance as I had thought, at least on the stat sheet, because Baylor was able to, where they kind of distanced themselves, was 30 points off turnovers. They led Texas by 9 in that category, 30-21 in points off turnovers. So I was like, wow, that's a big number. I wonder what the turnover numbers were. I forgot about this. There was some fast and loose play with the basketball in that game on December 30th down at the Moody Center, because Baylor did win the turnover battle, and they only turned the ball over themselves 22 times. UT did it 23 times. I know there's a few more turnovers in women's game than in the typical men's game, but to score 20, to give up, to turn the ball over 22 times and win the turnover battle and win the game is a pretty good stat to have. Baylor was able to run in that game. They had 15 fast break points, but so did UT. So a lot of things that were really close statistically. Now, the things that I think separated it for Baylor was that 30-21 off turnovers, and they were +8 in the paint in that game. We've talked about it this year. There aren't a lot of games where Baylor is going to dominate in the paint. But this is one of them. I know +8 ain't +16, but like that's dominant for a Baylor team in the paint. And so they've obviously had an area of focus there. The last couple of games, Asia Blackwell has the huge day with the 19 points. Oh my goodness. We've got breaking news right now as I go to look up the UT injury report, because I'll get killed if I don't mention this. DeSoto, 4-star wide receiver Dalen Singleton, posted, this is from Grayson Grundhafer, posted on his Instagram story about a potential surprise visit following Demetrius Brisbon's commitment to Baylor. So something to keep an eye on. So it's not a commitment, but he's a 4-star receiver from DeSoto and an SMU commit. This Khenon Hall gang, man. Khenon and the gang. That's huge. Oh, man. That is, oh, man. DeSoto can play some football, man. DeSoto can really, really play some football. Anyway, what I was going here for is Danny Davis, who's covering the Longhorns down there in Austin. Vic Schaefer said that both Madison Booker and Deanna Gaston would try to practice Tuesday. They practice Tuesday night. status for Thursday's trip to number 13 Baylor remains in the air. So obviously they've had a bunch of injury problems this year. Texas has. If those two aren't able to go, or if one of them is able to go, or even if they're not at 100%, which I don't think they will be, that's got to be advantage Baylor. Baylor's got to take advantage of that. It's not automatic that you win the game because they're not at 100% or they're not playing, but Baylor needs to take advantage of that. I'm excited. I'm going to try to go to this game. Let me know if you're going too. We should meet up, say hi. Actually, I'm really, really bad at talking to people in public. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. We're going to do a breakdown of how this game went on tomorrow's show. We're also going to preview Iowa State. We also, who knows, we might have some news on more Khenon Hall flips, and I'll be doing backflips because that is an interesting and exciting development for that class of 2025. Even if Daddy Dave gets fired throughout this year, keep Khenon Hall on the staff. Please don't let anything happen to him. And if Dave can get these guys in there too, keep Dave around. I'll take it. Anyway, thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. Be sure to leave a comment down below if you think I'm stupid or if you agree with anything I say or you just want to help the algorithm a little bit. What'd you think of that Baylor win last night? You think Baylor's going to win tonight? Give me your score predictions. And how about the job Khenon Hall is doing? Leave that down in the comments below. We'll be back tomorrow with the breakdown of that game against the Texas Longhorns and look at Iowa State over the weekend. It's going to be a fun weekend of Big 12 basketball on Locked on your first listen every day, your team every day, all that. Baylor.